Here it is, guys. Book Monkey Report. Lost Survivors of the Deluge. Gerd von Hassler. Translated by Martin Eben. So this was originally in French. Really good book. Very impressed. The startling evidence which finally unlocks the secrets of the gods. Here's the book right here, guys. It's amazing. How do I say it? It's amazing. Inside jacket. Why did cultures separated by time and vast distances share almost identical legends of the Great Deluge? Why do the Sumerians describe a boat similar in proportion to Noah's Ark and to ships that are sailing the oceans today? What is the true meaning of the reoccurring theme of the island, the mountain, and the world tree? Now, at last, these and other riddles of the past are answered in a provocative study that presents indisputable evidence which proves conclusively that the prehistoric New World was civilized by Noah and his descendants after their own homeland was destroyed in the flood. These are the lost survivors of the deluge. On the back, it says, was Noah's Ark really a huge sailing ship? Did Gilgamesh journey from Africa to the mouth of the Amazon in search of his ancestors? Was Atlantis the biblical Garden of Eden? The Bible, the Eddas, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the legends of Greece and India, of the Incas, Mayans, Aztecs, and the North American Indian tribes, all speak of a great flood which destroyed all but a very few lucky remnants of mankind. Just who were these survivors and what became of them? Drawing on a wide range of sources, from literature to archaeology, from Thor Heyerdahl's journeys to modern shipbuilding, Gerd von Hassler presents striking evidence which it finally explains such mysteries as where the Tree of Life was located, who the white gods of legends really were, what route Noah's Ark followed and where it finally ended up, what catastrophe caused the Great Deluge, and much, much more. That's this book. Read it cover to cover. It's fascinating. So, you guys know, as is my habit, I don't want to tell you about it. I want to show it to you. So let's dive on in. Let me check real quick, make sure you guys are seeing what's meant to be seen. Excellent. Excellent. So, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the mother goddess accuses the god of the world that he thoughtlessly created the deluge, thus condemning my people to destruction. The final appeal, however, provides a striking contrast to the Bible. Here, there is no plea to be fruitful and multiply. No matter how much the sun god denounces the deluge, he nevertheless suggests that mankind ought to be kept down by devouring forces of nature, whether lions or wolves, starvation or pestilence. So, the elements here are very interesting because in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have the elements here that I've discussed many times in Archaix. The mother goddess accuses the god of the world that he thoughtlessly created the deluge. Now, in the New Testament version, Satan, the adversary, the devil, is the god of this world, and he caused the great flood. Now, the mother goddess is a reference to the matriarchy before the flood. Excuse me. So it's really interesting that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it preserves this matriarchal aspect. For the mother goddess to accuse the god of the world, it means that she was an equal or greater power. After the flood, things changed. Again, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have the sun god making an appearance at the flood. This is what we have with Utu-Shamash. Utu-Shamash is the very last god entered into the Sumerian pantheon. And yet the Sumerians had many gods. But the very last god was the sun. Why? Because the sun didn't appear until the vapor canopy collapsed and caused the Great Flood. For those of you who have new to my channel and you want to know about vapor canopy, I have a video that goes into detail about the four main books, scientific books from the 1920s, 30s, 50s, and 70s that were published showing that our world once had a vapor canopy. These books are very rare, they're hard to find, but I have all four of them, and I did a video on these scientific works on vapor canopy. So anyway, the sun god appeared. It's the same thing that we find out in ancient Egyptian legends. In the ancient Egyptian legends, we have a long pantheon of the Ogdoad, the Aeneid, the 9 gods, and the 8 god pantheons. But then all of a sudden, who appears? The sun. Horus appears in the sky. Why? It's the second intermediate period. In the Egyptian legends, we find out there was a world destruction and the sun was born. Well, how could the sun just be born? And not all it's because it's the first time they ever saw it. The vapor canopy always hid the sun. So this is epic. This is a fragment from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Oh, when you go back at the bottom. The conflict among the gods emerges from the Epic of Gilgamesh just as clearly as it does from the Edda or the Deluge epics of Central America. He's going to give us some more on that. He really tied in some really interesting things. So this is the beginning of the book. Let's see. It seems more likely that Ararat is a more recent label for Mount Nasir. Now, this is interesting. At the time, Egyptian records were established some 2,000 years BC. 2 points are being made here. First of all, Mount Ararat is where it is in the biblical version, Noah's Ark landed. But in the Epic of Gilgamesh and in the stories of Anapishtim, the Ark landed on Mount Nasir. The other point he's making here is something that's very, very important. We always love to claim the high antiquity of ancient civilizations that have been romanticized, like Egypt and India and Sumer and Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa. But these things are just, they're not true. When we break things down to their core components, we find out that literacy didn't even begin until after the flood. Writing did not. It started off as pictographs, logograms, and it developed into high cuneiform, and then fragmented in different stylized cuneiforms for different cultures. And then the Phoenicians introduced the alphabet, and after Minoan Linear A, Minoan Linear B. We don't have any of this development until post-cataclysm. Prior to the Great Flood, there are no records of any type of writings. Just like the descriptions of Noah's Ark in Genesis match the Sumerian Ark of Anapishtim or Atrahasis of the Akkadian epic. The dimensions of the Ark are not of an ancient ship. Remember how many times in Archaix I have told you guys, we are looking forward into the future at our ancient history and what really happened before the flood. The further we study the trajectory of where we're going, the more we understand where we came from. Remember, we're in a programmed loop. Let's get into it. So this comment here, at the time Egyptian records were established, some 2,000 years BC. That is 239 years after the Great Flood. Plenty of time for writing to develop. All right. So he's breaking down the Genesis text, which I did recently in another video. This is what he's saying. This is Genesis 6. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. There is no reason to interpret these sentences in the manner of Eric von Daniken, the writer who has imagined the landings of extraterrestrial space pilots in order to note a development that has been confirmed by modern explorers. Wherever men of higher civilization make their appearance, members of a more primitive cultures elevate them to godlike status. The biblical sentences quoted above indicate just this and nothing else. We find the same attitude reflected in the Nordic Edda and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, wherever the relations between heroes and gods are described. This is the Archaix narrative as well. Oh my God. I just quoted a book written by a fantastic researcher in French that was published in 1976, meaning he did this research when I was born in 1973. 1976 is when it made it into print. So I didn't bring anything new to the table. All I did was show you that Ancient Aliens, Facebook educated Billy Carson narratives are bullshit. The whole Ancient Aliens franchise is built off adult fantasy. But it was known before I was born. Here it is right here in this book. Fantastic. The things people forget are often quite as interesting as those they remember. Because in this category too, we find agreement. All three traditions, the Bible, the Gilgamesh epic, and the Edda, describe Deluge survivors who were like gods or close to gods. They were, in other words, members of a superior civilization. However, this civilization ceased to exist after the deluge. Can't say it any better than that. We're not dealing with gods. We're dealing with an advanced civilization in the ancient world. Man, I caught a bug overnight. I'm on this rigid carnivore diet, guys, and I've been on it for 20. I was on it for 26 days straight, rigidly, and then I broke pattern because I've been reading about how you shock your system. I'm in full ketosis, and oh my God, I ate 2 street tacos and a piece of a quesadilla, and within 6 hours, my body was revolting. My body was yeah. I've had sinus drainage and mucus all night long. I was up all night. I'm like, man, I can't believe this. I cannot believe how great I've been feeling on this diet. And in full ketosis, my every bit of protein I'm eating, sausages and sauerkraut. I'm eating yeah, all the pickled stuff. I eat olives with my steaks, with my pork chops. I'll eat a pickle spear. You know, this is all the vinegar, all the pickled stuff, like pickled asparagus, is all good on the carnivore diet. It's been fermented. It's good for gut health. But I don't eat anything else as far as those vegetables and all that. I'm talking about on a once in a blue moon, I'll have a little bit of white rice with a steak. You know what? It's been amazing. The entire transformation in my physique, in my cognition. It's been great, guys. And then I cheated because I was out and the menu sucked, and it was a Mexican restaurant, and I just picked whatever they had, and I thought, okay, I'll be cool for one. Listen, the body knows. I've had 0 processed foods since October 1st, and as soon as I indulged in 2 street tacos and a part of a quesadilla, my body told me, don't ever do that again. And I'm still suffering for it. All right. I was raised on Mexican food too. It's crazy. It's crazy, man, how fast, how resilient the body is. It becomes almost inevitable to look upon the civilization of the Aesir as having reached a particularly high level. The name of Atracasis creates this association almost immediately. This point is confirmed by 2 scholars, Hugo Gressman and A. Ungnad, in their analysis of the Epic of Gilgamesh. They state that the name Atracasis means the highly intelligent, while Casis is equivalent to bright, clever, or smart. Once we remove the Semitic throat sound of CH, the KH, we arrive at Asis, which is close to Aesir. The consonants T and S are linguistically often interchangeable. The Aesir are the ancient race in the Nordic traditions. So we're moving over to ancient America, and he cites something I've talked about frequently on my channel, and this is the history of the Toltecs. So in the history of the Toltecs, we have the first world lasted 1,716 years. Then came the deluge. All land with the highest mountains was covered by the sea, 15 fathoms deep. But the people who were saved, these very few, built a tall tower, the Tower of Zakuli, so that they might save themselves should the second world too be destroyed. The Toltecs, 7 friends with their wives, came to this country after crossing first through vastnesses of land and sea, living in caves, survived much ill fortune to reach this country. They traveled 104 years across many parts of the world before they reached Huhualapan. This occurred in Tecpatl, 520 years after the flood. So what we have here in the Toltec version, which a lot of people like Barry Fell, who wrote America BC, and others who have gone deep into American studies, what we have here is let me get that bottom part off. It's not going to go off. All right. What we have here is a retelling of the landing of an advanced race among the early American people. It's a retelling of the story. So the first world lasted 1,716 years. This is very close to the pre-flood world duration of 1656 years. As a matter of fact, it's the same amount of years, but factoring in a different arithmetic. Let me explain. The Toltecs factored everything by the calendar round, which they inherited from the Aztecs. This was a 52-year cycle of basically preparations for destruction. So I need to turn this AC off. So 1,716 years is merely 52 times 33. Where did they get the number 33? They got the number 33 because the ancient Jubilee system, 1656 years, is 33 Jubilees. So they knew that there was 33 epochs of time involved, and they had already forgotten the 50-year Jubilee period. 49 years, 7 times 7 plus one rest year. So in the ancient American systems, they employed the calendar round, the 52-year cycle, which was inherited from the Aztecs, who got it from the Maya, who got it from the Maya long count, who inherited it from the Olmeca. So 1716 years is divisible by 52. But so is 104. It says that they traveled 104 years after they left the caves of the earth. This advanced race came up from the underground. It's right here in the telling. And they traveled to the Americas. They landed in their advanced fleets of ships. And they did it in 104 years. And then they grew up among the Americans, and they built a tower called Zakuli, Tower of Babel. They didn't want to be destroyed by a flood. So they grow up among the people, and let's see, they traveled over many parts of the world. First crash. Okay, and they established their civilization in ancient America 520 years after the flood. 520 is 52 times 10. It's 10 calendar rounds, and it's pretty close to the truth. 104 years of travel time to get to the Americas from the land of their nativity after the flood cataclysm. 104 is 52 plus 52. So This is all in my chronicon too. When I go through the Toltec chronology. So, on March 1st, 1976, the World Press reported details of explorations undertaken by an Italian expedition to Antarctica. The explorers reported that under the ice of the area, they had discovered a petrified forest, 250 meters wide and 2,000 meters long. The Italian explorers, and not only they, regarded this discovery as support for the hypothesis that 14 to 16,000 years ago, Antarctica had enjoyed a moderate climate. Now, you guys know I'm a critic of this, that they've made a critical mistake, because the only reason this hypothesis of 14,000 to 16,000 years ago even exists is because of Ice Age theory. So they packaged their discovery under a scientific paradigm that is hence unprovable. Yeah, you guys know that the Piri Reis map, the Turkish maps, and other maps from the 14th and 15th and 16th century show Antarctica with no ice caps. It shows it with forests, mountains, and valleys. And this is because we have had repeated vapor canopies. And anytime there's a vapor canopy in the sky, what happens? There's no ice caps. That's where all the moisture is. 2-mile high ice caps, for some reason, during the Phoenix phenomenon, they go back into the sky and they create the canopy. When they collapse as rain, they flood the interior of the world, but the perimeter of our world is frozen, solid. Ice caps return. So the very fact that we have these 600 and 700-year-old maps of Antarctica is proof that this ice cap and what buried these beautiful forests wasn't 14 or 16,000 years ago. Copies of 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 old maps would still not survive 14 to 16,000 years, especially when it's absolutely proven that we have no writings from before 43 centuries ago. The Greek philosopher Plato described a flood catastrophe that may have taken place 8,000 years before his own time. He lived from 427 to 347 BC, which caused the disappearance of a whole continent. This has prompted several analysts to assume that Plato must have misplaced a zero. The sinking of Atlantis, they say, should have taken place between 1400 and 1200 BC. Archaics for the win. What have I been telling you guys? Graham Hancock absolutely refuses to cite all this research. This man is steadily pushing this. So is Billy Carson. So is Matt LaCroix. So is Jimmy Corsetti. They're all pushing this fantasy BS. Atlantis is younger Dryas period because it tries to give credence to a scientific theory that's also bogus called Ice Age. It's crazy. Glaciation is real. The distribution of errata by glaciation is real, but it's so temporary. Yeah. Remember, the true history of the world is the catastrophist model. The uniformitarian model is the one promoted by the CIA. It's the one promoted by the establishment that lies to you. It's the same establishment that owns CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox News, all the media. So why are you going to believe them? It's ridiculous. Yeah. And anybody coming out the London School of Economics is nothing but a shill that's trained to do exactly what the establishment wants them to do, which is teach you a false version of history. Among the Algonquin, these are the North American Indian tribes, this divine hero was called Gluskap. His work completed, Gluskap took a bark canoe and set off into the sunrise. But the Algonquin believed firmly that someday he would return again. He was a giant slayer. He was a civilization bringer. He invented the calendar. He was a hero. He was advanced. Gluskap is the memory of a leader of an advanced civilization who left, promising to return to the ancient Americas. Gluskap is no different than Bokica. He is no different than Quetzalcoatl. He is no different than, oh my God, Votan, and so many others that are mentioned throughout North, Central, and South America. But there was unimpeded. Okay, let us remember the disrespectful Nordic divinity, Loki, personification of evil, who bluntly accused his fellow gods of greater and lesser missteps, including adultery and secret erotic pleasures. His insults would not be permitted, even in one of today's permissive parliaments. We should also note that one of the accuses. Okay, that's beyond this. Remember, Loki is no different than Enki. He was demonized ex post facto. Why was Enki demonized by the other Sumerian gods, Ea, Enlil, and An? Why? And his father? Why was he demonized later? Because Enki was a benefactor to humans. The gods created disasters to kill humans, but Enki gave up the game, not only telling humans the Great Flood was coming, but also explaining how they could survive by building fleets of arcs. Enki did that. Enki also, in the Sumerian text, did something else. He forbade the other Anunnaki to use technologically advanced weapons against just normal humans. For this, he was a benefactor, but among the gods, and it was the gods, the highly technological people, who forged the traditions that were later written. So they demonized Loki. I mean, they demonized Enki. In other traditions, Enki became Loki, who was demonized. But Loki told the truth. He's the serpent that told the truth, that the gods are effing you off. They are not who they claim to be. They are evil. They are perverse. And because he told humans the truth, he was demonized by his contemporaries. One thing had nothing to do with the other. Originally, gods did not come down from heaven, but from the mountains, just as the Deluge tradition of India tells us. That is what is known as the descent of Manu from the mountain of the north. This is what I've told you guys in Archaix too from other traditions. I've explained it. Ancient Aliens franchise is lying to you. There are no ancient traditions of gods coming from the stars to do anything. It says when they descended to earth, it was always from the mountaintops. Why? Because the technology was preserved in the alpine regions that had ingress and egress points in those mountains to subterranean underground facilities where these races survived these cataclysms, while those on the surface of the planet or the world, whatever you want to call it, the earthborn races were subject to the cataclysms and the resets, while the elite in their facilities underground largely survived. This is the story of Manco Capac. Far away, southeast of Cuzco, stands a holy hill. It is called Temputoco, and the place on which the hill is situated is Pacari Temcu. Again, these divine mountains and these hills, this is Cuzco in South America. The holy hill was only deemed holy because it was an access to the underworld. A long time ago, from the three openings of the hills emerged Manco Capac. From the three openings of the hill. Remember my occultist mysterium video where I'm showing hundreds of alchemical treatise pictures and all that. I'm showing that the phoenix is hidden in all these pictures, even references to 138. But in many of the pictures of the phoenix, it shows the elite in underneath hills that have one or three entrances. A long time ago, from the three openings of these hills emerged Manco Capac, his three brothers and their four sisters. At the time, Manco Capac was still known as Ar Manco. Manco Capac, his brothers and sisters traveled westward to the Valley of Cuzco. This is South America. Yet their wanderings lasted for many years. The first of the brothers threw stones from a mountain that tore open whole ravines. These others began to fear him, and they sent him back to the hill from which they had come. The second brother turned to stone. The third brother turned to stone. But Manco Capac and his sister went to Cuzco. A son was born to Manco and his oldest sister, Mama Achlo, or Akio. At last, they arrived in Cuzco. They tested the earth with their golden staff, found it to be fertile, and remained. They acquired the people and animals of the country and built houses in the town, which was called Coricancha, Temple of the Sun. Pretty interesting elements here. Pretty interesting elements. So the ancestors came from underground, traveled to the ancient Americas, and then ruled over the people that were there. The turning of stone. The only traditions I can find of people turning to stone were those of the Titans and the giants that were later called in their old age trolls. And in those traditions, it was when the sun appeared that those with troll blood died. You saw this tradition mirrored in the Lord of the Rings. When sunlight touches the trolls, they disappear. But it has a deeper meaning. When the vapor canopy collapsed at the Great Flood, technologically advanced races were hiding underground. When they came back up, many of them couldn't survive the new harsh conditions. What were those conditions? The sun was now appearing in the sky. The vapor canopy was gone. Where was the vapor canopy? Well, it flooded the world, but most of the canopy had frozen at the polar extremes. So here we have the turning to stone of people who had come up. This is part of their legends, and what it really was people died from coming up from underground, coming from a vapor canopy world, and then coming from underground after the cataclysm, coming up to the surface. They died under the sunlight. These people were huge. They were enormous, of Titan blood and giant blood. Average size humans that were still on the surface were not affected, not as bad. All of these gods had come from the east. Even in the Chronicle of Cachiquel, the ancient Mexican, we read 4 men arrived from Tula from the direction of the rising sun. And the cities founded by these white gods were called, among others, by names such as these: Cholula, Colcan, Suvan, Cotima, Salisco. These correspond almost to the letter to the cities listed by Ptolemy in 140 BC in his geography of Asia Minor. Why is this interesting? In Chronicon, I show you that the 7 cities of Asia Minor were Israelite cities, and the Ionian Greeks were Israelite pedigree, and they exported fleets all over the ancient world. All over the ancient world, going to the Americas, all the coasts of the Mediterranean, the Aegean, the Adriatic, the Atlantic, all around up to Europe, all the way to the Emerald Isles, to ancient Ireland and Albion, Britain, the Isle of Man, Manu. They exported fleets all over. Those fleets landed in Ecuador, and from Ecuador, they went to South America and up the coasts of North America. This was the ancient kingdom of Miletus. And this is Ionia, and Miletus was its capital city. And these happen to also be the 7 cities in Turkey mentioned by the Apostle Paul as the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Excuse me. Noah did not find his homeland again. It had disappeared into the Atlantic. Instead, he reached the coast of the American continent. We know this because his footprints in the Americas are beyond doubt. He spends a lot of time in this book right here proving his case. He spends a lot of time showing that Noah did not land in the Near East. Noah landed in ancient America. And this goes lockstep in with the Archaix data. Why? Because I told you, when the Amuru, the Westerners, left the Americas, they flooded the Mediterranean. The Amuru were a part of the Sea Peoples Federation also. When they came from the Americas in two massive waves, one in the 18th century and 17th century BC, they took over the Near East. They took over the Hittites. They established their power base in Mitanni, at the capital city of Mari, of the Amorites. They took over Syria, Aram, northern Egypt. The two Egypts, one of them was Amuru, one of them was traditional indigenous Egyptians. This is why the two Egypts are 450 miles apart. The northern Egypt of the Amuru had pyramids. The southern Egypt does not. They buried their pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings. So we have here, this book is showing that Noah never landed in Turkey. Noah never landed the ark never landed in Turkey. That geological formation or that archaeological remains was of a ship, but it's not Noah's ark on Mount Ararat, if indeed it's a ship formation at all. What we have are a massive amount of traditions in the ancient of Americas of the flood. And I have shown you, and in my Chronicon and in my published books and in my videos, I have shown you that the Americas provide us far more details about the pre-flood world than anything that can be found anywhere else in the world. The Americas have it all. All these ancient American traditions tell us of the giants and Spider Grandmother and of the great web that was in the sky that held the waters above. Listen, this is deep, because he's showing in this book that Noah's Ark may have left the Near East, but when it landed 150 days later, it landed in the Americas. And this is the reason why Americas have the most ancient, technologically advanced stone cities. And then the Amuru invaded after the flood Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. That invasion, they brought a syllabus. This is all in Archaix. It's not in this book. In Archaix, I've already showed you the Amuru, the Westerners brought the syllabus, and in that syllabus was a history of the creation, the pre-flood world, the seven kings, the dragon kings, the flood itself, the building of the Tower of Babel. All this was a part of an ancient syllabus. And it's the reason why all these cultures told the story in the exact same way, with the exact same details. Because they were not reciting histories they knew, they were reciting a syllabus that had been taught to them. That's right. This guy is providing how that happened. We know that these gods were men. They were members of a superior and advanced civilization, set back by a cosmic catastrophe, the Phoenix phenomenon, without precedent in human memory, forced to face a Stone Age struggle for life, total systemic reset, as I've shown in Archaix. They did have their skills and powers and were able to demonstrate their superiority, but there were too few of them to be able to create a new culture, a new civilization for mankind. Within the void, they were forced to face. There it is, guys. I've said all this in Archaix presentations the past 4 years, over and over. But here it is from a 1976 book written in French. But if one asks the ancient Peruvians whether their legends and myths contain memories of a technocultural upswing, they tell this story. Viracocha created the world, but it was dark and without sun. So he set a big fire and thus created a breed of giants. First, Viracocha sculpted them in stone. So this gives us our reasoning as to why, when the sun appeared, that the other American traditions claim that when the ancestors came from underground and they were under the sun killed them and they turned to stone. Here it is, because in the Genesis narrative, it's humans are made from the dirt and the dust of the earth, and when they die, they return to dust. It's the same thing here. In the Americans, humanity was made from rock and stone, and therefore, when you die, you return to rock and stone, which is your bones. It makes perfect sense. Again, a reference to the giants in a world. You caught that? The reference to giants in a world that had no sun. And then when the sun appeared, men died and became a stone. Yeah, vapor canopy. They were vapor canopy world. Then he turned the giants back into stone. Thus we see them today in Tiwanaku and in many other places. Those he did not turn into stone, he drowned amidst the great flood. The last known Mayan structure was built in 909 at a time when Europe entered the Middle Ages. That's interesting. I want to see something. He says the oldest date of Mayan civilization is the year 57. Well, that's going to be interesting. 909. Huh? So he's telling us it's 852 years. But 852 is 470. 852 was 476, and nah, that's not right. That's 952. All right. So the last known Mayan structure was built in 909 AD. Well, that's just a few years to 936, because in 936 AD was the total end of Mayan civilization. They vanished. 936 is a phoenix year on the 138-year timeline going all the way to 2040 and 2178. So that is interesting. Very interesting. According to Archaix, the Olmec Empire was only a brief interlude in the cultural history of Central America. It began in the 1st and disappeared in the 2nd century AD, from the years 31 to 162. Okay, there's an oversight here. It's supposed to say it disappeared. It began in the 1st century BC and disappeared in the 2nd century AD. The reason I know this is because he even gave the precise year. It's from the years 31 to 162. Okay, he's wrong. He's wrong and right. 31 is the correct year, but it was not AD. It's BC. I show this in Chronicon, and I show the sources from encyclopedias and archaeological works. 31 BC is the final year on an Olmec date stele. And the reason it's interesting is because even though it's the final year that the Olmecs ever chiseled in stone, it's also the exact year on the 138-year Phoenix timeline that a sky dragon appeared over Egypt. The Battle of Actium suffered one of the worst earthquakes in the Mediterranean history. From Greece to Jerusalem, the world was shaken during the Battle of Actium. Blood rains fell from the sky. This is 31 BC, but the Olmec civilization in Central America was wiped out. So iron, which can be traced to Egypt in 1300 BC, was unknown in the Americas until the time of Columbus. But we know this to be untrue. Berry fell in America BC, and many other one of my favorites. You guys know David Hatcher Childress has mentioned it, but so has Jonathan Gray of BeforeUs.com. Thompson and what is that book? Forbidden Archaeology. Yeah, Cremo and Thompson. Several accounts of iron in the Americas. But what's interesting is iron, which can be traced to Egypt in 1300 BC. That's absolutely correct. This is how the dating of the Sea Peoples Federation goes. Plato's narrative specifically says that the Atlanteans invaded during a time when iron had first appeared in the area. This dates it to 13th century BC, when Athens was founded. Remember, the Atlanteans were at war with Athens. Please tell Graham Hancock Athens didn't exist, and iron wasn't even manufactured or mined or smelted in 9600 BC. Please tell Mr. Hancock that the Younger Dryas period had no Greek or Athenian states. Please tell that dude, because he's not listening to me. All right, so I've already reduced this. Let me go back. So Otto Henrik Muck, Henrik Muck, inventor of the submarine snorkel and one of the pioneers of rocketry. He's now dead. But he had said, this is very interesting because he had said to this, and I got it on another. Here it is right here. I blew it up. Pay attention to this. This concerns the origin of the holy symbols of the divine mountain and the world tree. This is from the perspective of an ancient mariner race. Muck said to himself, when I approach a faraway coastline from the sea and view a mountain that rises 5,000 meters above it, and whose crater, invisible to me, exhales a narrow pillar of smoke that becomes a dark cloud beneath the wide blue sky, then what I see looks like a tree, and from the tree seems to grow a thickly leafed web of branches that seem to support the dome of heaven. Muck wrote that with this image, we have rediscovered the primal vision on which the mythical symbol is based. Muck said, I made an experiment. I asked friends to draw a volcano on a piece of paper, a pillar of smoke rising from it to the sky. Later, I asked other acquaintances to look at these drawings and tell me what they saw in them. Their answers were spontaneous. A tree on a mountain. It is a pleasant parlor game that anyone can duplicate. In 9 out of 10 cases, such a drawing will be identified as a tree on top of a mountain. And that is a tree which supports the heavens. So the ancients said when they wanted to describe the home of the gods. This is from the perspective of a mariner race. Like a thunderclap and a stroke of lightning, the darkness surrounding the grim and giant guardian of paradise is also lit up. Thousands of legends and fairy tales suddenly become transparent. Their content is as clear as if we had broken a mysterious code. So that's all it was. The origin of the motif of the divine tree and the divine mountain was from ancient mariners, ships. After a cataclysm, the survivors are on their ships. This is the first time they've ever seen during the Phoenix phenomenon, the flood. They're seeing volcanoes erupt, and they come across one of them at sea, and it's this beautiful mountain spewing forth a trunk. And at the top of the trunk, the smoke billowers outward like tree branches going in all different directions. And to the ancient mariners on the sea, they're looking at the home of the gods, the divine mountain that supports the world tree. The gods came homeless into our world. They permitted our ancestors to participate in their culture. This is the Anuna and civilization. Then, once they had left their gifts with us, they left this world, as do all men, but we remain their heirs. I say it all the time in my Anuna files. We are the Anuna. So the technique of shipbuilding knows a rule that has achieved scientific exactitude. Anything that wants to move independently within water has to have a shape that meets the demands of this element. The myth provides us with specific figures for the boxes that left Noah's home region early enough to find new landing places during the turmoil of the deluge. I asked myself whether these figures correspond to the dimensions required in shipbuilding technique, and I discovered that they did correspond exactly to the large ships built during the past century. He's literally telling us that the size of Noah's Ark in Genesis and in the Atrahasis epic and in the Epic of Gilgamesh is almost the exact dimensions of modern day ships. I saw that the Polish training ship Dar Pomorza was nearly 60 meters high. measured from keel to the top of its mast. The Deluge tradition contained in the Epic of Gilgamesh shows that a Napishtim ship was 60 meters high and was identified as a tall building. Can one imagine a tall building 60 meters high that swims in the water? How was it propelled forward? Could Noah have managed to row a 120-meter long box? Or could he have left it to drift? But huge wooden structures of the dimensions of a sailing vessel do not simply drift through stormy seas from the Atlantic to the shores near the Caucasus. And you can't row them either. I talked to old, experienced captains of sailing vessels, men who had operated wooden ships without engine power. During a storm, such ships must be sailed using storm sails and steered, if possible, diagonally across the oncoming waves. Also, only in this manner can wooden structures survive days and weeks in heavy seas. Otherwise, they will sooner or later spring a leak and be capsized. So we're left with this amazing book, the observations this man made. I'm hoping some of you can find this book. I'm hoping you guys find this book and you're able to read it. It is fantastic. But here's a ancient ruins that were found in the shape of a boat. It's all stonework right there. The civilizations of the old and new world shared the myth that the world of immortal gods, a region beyond death, was located eastward and could only be reached by sea. That's a pretty good picture. Got quite a few pictures in here of all kinds of different stuff. Good stuff. 1976, the man made the conclusion that Noah's Ark was a modern, technologically advanced ship that just happened to survive the cataclysm. It's like a cataclysm of equal proportion to the great flood of Noah happening in the year 2025. And sometime in 2026, this barge full of all men, just men that were working, trapped at sea during the cataclysm. When they finally land on shore, they have all these provisions and all that, but there's only about 50 men on board. They have to start a whole new civilization because their homeland is gone. Everything they left behind, gone. This is the story of Enki. This is the story of Cecrops. It is the story of Ogyges. It is the story of Danao, who led the Tuatha Danann. It's the story of many civilization builders. 1976, this man came to the conclusions as if he had been studying the archaic material. The past is explainable in that before the flood, the reason we don't have writing, the reason we don't have much preserved is because it was a technologically advanced society and they lost everything. Total systemic reset. Great book. This concludes this Book Monkey presentation.